Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, everybody here. 1.5. Ready? Here we go. Solve quadratic equations. What is a quadratic equation? What is it?
Well, we're gonna have to restart the video.
What's a quadratic
so
equation?
There's an x squared crosses.
Yay, there's an x squared in it. Good. An equation, top of page 21 in your notebook. An equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. What needs to be true? Where a, b, and c are real numbers. Now that you know what non-real numbers are, or imaginary numbers, a, b, and c are real numbers. And there's one other thing that needs to be true about this so that it remains a quadratic. Something about a, b, or c, something needs to be true for this to be a quadratic. It's one of the letters can't be something.
One letter can be negative.
Not can't be negative.
Like C can't be 0.
Can't be 0.
A can't be 0. What would happen if a was 0?
The whole thing would be it wouldn't non-existent.
It wouldn't be a quadratic because this term would disappear and then it would just be bx plus c or mx plus b.
Oh.
Y equals mx plus yeah, okay. A, b, and c are real numbers and a can't be 0. Good. That's the only definition we need. We're going to jump into an investigation which says solve each of these things. Okay, so we're going to solve these things. So when we're finding the square root of a positive value, what you're going to learn is that there are actually going to be two solutions. So in one, it says solve x squared equals 4. What does it mean to solve something?
Find the answer.
Find the value of.
Find the value of the variable. In this case, we're finding the value of x. So look at this. How do we solve this? Well, it's being squared, so I need to square root both sides. So x is equal to the square root of 4. Am I done?
No.
Not done. What is
4
next?
times 4.
It's
28. X equals 28.
Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 4 is 2. But 4 also has another square root. There is another number times itself. -2 also times itself equals 4. So listen, x equals 2 or x equals -2. When you take the square root of a positive value, there are two possible solutions. That's important to remember.
Why isn't
Okay.
it just one or the other? I remember doing this.
So every
When you
time-
punch it in,
Because both of them are true.
Every time we're solving.
If you punch it into your calculator will tell you the answer is 2, but -2 is just as right as 2.
Every time
Okay.
we solve one of these, though, we have to write both answers.
You will be getting both answers, yes, because solving these things is going to relate directly to the zeros of a quadratic equation, which relate to the x-intercepts of a graph. So for instance, if you had a graph, a parabola, and you did all this work and then you said, oh, this is the answer, you'd be wrong. Okay,
Oh,
this is just as much an answer as that. Okay, good.
So you're marking the 2 points where a crosses x.
Yes, essentially
I
that's
get it.
the goal of solving a quadratic equation. Okay, let's look at this one. Bed mass, right? Bed mass. So we need to take care of the bracket first. The bracket is a group and it's being raised to an exponent. So what do I need to do in order to solve this one? What's my first step?
You have to
Should you
multiply
expand
the bracket.
I don't need to expand it. I
Okay.
don't need to expand it because I already have a nice little
Square.
group
Divide both
that's
sides by
being
4.
squared.
Square.
Why
So I
four?
just need to square root both sides. Square root both sides. And that will eliminate.
Doesn't do anything.
So you can think of x plus 1 as a single entity. Say like a. And what you have is a squared. Well, what did we do over here? We square rooted both sides. Okay, over here I'll square root both sides. That's going to give me just the group, x plus 1, equals the square root of 4, which we already did. We got 2 answers. Okay,
-2.
That's, how do you figure
so
that
it's
Make sure
got.
you put the square root over top.
So you just solve it both times.
I'll do it in 2 steps, okay? So now we have x plus 1 equals a square root of 4. Whenever you see something like this, you have to think to yourself, this represents 2 solutions. It represents a solution here because x plus 1 can equal 2, but x plus 1 also equals -2, okay? Square root of a positive value has 2 solutions. How do we solve? We're continuing to solve. We subtract 1 from both sides. It's going to give us x equals 1. Over here, if we subtract 1 from both sides, we get x equals -3. Okay?
So
-2 minus 1.
So those are the 2 x-intercepts then, right?
If we were in the, yes, if this was like y equals x plus 1 squared minus 4, then yes, they would be. But this is not, this doesn't have 2 variables, so this isn't a graph of anything in particular. It's just an equation.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with functions, though?
In example 1, we're going to look at a couple of 3 different strategies for solving. Strategies for solving quadratics. I'm not going to write the whole thing. There we go. Strategies for solving quadratics. We're going to take this quadratic that they've given us, 2x squared minus 12x minus 14 equals 0, and we're going to solve it by completing the square. Then we're going to solve it by factoring. Then we're going to solve it by quadratic formula. You're probably going to have to write fairly small. Do you guys have 3 little columns like that? Probably going to have to write fairly small. But do your best. So here we go. Complete the square. Ready? This is a review for you. You wanted review? Here it is. 2x squared minus 12x minus 14 equals 0. Here are the steps for completing the square. I'm going to group my terms involving x. I'm going to leave -14 on the outside of that group. And then I'm going to make sure I have a coefficient of 1. So inside this group, I'm actually going to factor out the 2 from both terms. Here's what the next step looks like then.
Wait, don't you have to,
If I have grouped these guys, then I have 2 times x squared minus 6x.
how can I
Close the
go
bracket,
out?
minus 14. That's called factoring. This is 2 of these groups. If I have this group twice, I'll have the exact same as the first group that I started with. Okay, it's factoring. If you need help on that, you can ask later.
You just took one.
Now I'm going to complete the square within that bracket. What does that look like? Well, the rule for that is take half of b and square it. So I'm going to add -3 squared. Half of -6 is -3 squared. If I add that, I have to subtract that. Now when I subtract it, I'm not going to call it -3 squared. I'm going to call it -9. It's the same thing. And outside here, I have -14 equals 0.
Yeah, you just cancel out. I remember.
Okay?
Yeah, you're canceling.
Now,
Technically.
this is all I need for my perfect square trinomial. 1, 2, 3 terms makes a trinomial, and it's a perfect square because I created the last term. But I don't need this -9. But I can't just put -9 out. This -9 is actually -9 times 2. So if I'm going to remove it from being multiplied by 2, it's not going to be -9 out here. It's going to be -18. So I rewrite my sentence. I'm going to do 2 steps at once here, maybe 3 actually, just to speed it along. This is my perfect square trinomial. I know it can be represented as a binomial squared. The binomial is a, which if I have x squared, a is x, minus b, which is the number inside the bracket here. It's just 3. Okay? That is the same. And now I have a plus minus 18 on the outside and a minus 14. That's minus 32 equals 0. Okay, I've completed the square, but I haven't actually solved anything. Okay? To solve it means to find the value of x. So now what I'm going to do is solve it by I want x to be by itself when I'm done. So we're going to strip things away from x as we solve. So what does that mean? Do what's easiest first. It's kind of like x is in a package You know how like you go to a birthday party for kids and you wrap it, you play a game where you have like a little toy inside, but you wrap it in like a million layers of something and you keep on peeling off those layers and eventually somebody gets what's inside. It's kind of like that. Or you do a gift exchange and you put like a little thing in a big box and then you put it in a bigger box and you put it in a bigger box.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. We're taking off those boxes. We're taking off those layers. So basically what I'm saying is, look, this x is really tightly attached to the -3 because they're inside the bracket. Yeah? And then it's tight, and then that group is most tightly attached to this. This is the next wrapper that's going to come off. Or this, sorry. And then you have, this is the next wrapper. And then way on the outside, it's wrapped in this -32. So that's actually the first thing that comes off.
Would you just do 2 times those brackets?
Another way to understand this
Plus 30.
is when we solve, we use bedmass in reverse.
How do you know when to use it in reverse?
Okay? When you're solving for x.
Okay.
So when we did it this way, you would use bedmass the right way if you're evaluating something. Now that we're solving, we're going to use it in reverse. So here we have addition and subtraction. We're going to add 32 to both sides. Ready? 2, x minus 3 squared stays, and we've added 32 to both sides. Notice now that you're in grade 11, I don't write minus 32 from the left, plus 32 from the left, plus 32 on the right. I don't write those steps anymore, okay? I just assume that you know those steps. Okay?
I did.
Next, multiplication and division. That means since this group is being multiplied by 2, how do I undo that? I divide both sides by 2. Watch, I don't actually have to draw a line and a number 2.
I'm gonna do it.
I just write what's left.
I'm a visual learner.
I had 2 of these groups, and now I have 1 of them. Divide this side by 2. 32 divided by 2 is 16. Now what? Now I take the square root of both sides. Square root of both sides because I have to deal with my exponent before my group inside the bracket. Square root of both sides. On the left, it leaves us with x minus 3. On this side, it leaves us with 4. Uh-oh. Just 4?
No.
No, plus 3.
Plus, no, minus 3.
Plus
What?
4 or minus 4 is the square root of 16.
X equals 1.
Okay, so we actually have 2 solutions here.
X equals 1. Right?
One is this. No. And one is x minus 3 equals -4.
Wait, plus 3. Can you
Okay.
do plus 3?
All right, last step, add 3 to both sides. Gives us x equals 7 or x equals -1. Okay, there are your 2 solutions.
Yay.
How did you feel about that?
It's pretty good.
We completed the square, and then we undid all of those things to x and got x by
I don't
itself.
think the math
If
is
you
right.
just-
Yeah, I remember that.
Here we go. I'm going to start with the same equation. 2x squared minus 12x minus 14 equals 0. And we're going to solve by factoring. So factoring, you're probably thinking of common factor. If you can see a common factor, you pull that out. Do you see a common factor between all 3 terms? Sure do. They're all even numbers. So let's pull out a 2 from all of these, which means that I'm left with x squared minus 6x minus 7.
Oh, it's all coming back.
And by the way, since this is an equation that equals 0, my next step could be to divide both sides by 2, right?
0,
Yeah.
but
0 divided by 2 is just 0. So actually, if I just erase that 2 and I erase the brackets, this is also true. If this statement is true, this statement is also
so
true.
just divide
Okay.
2 by both sides? Okay.
So we have factored out the 2 and we divided the whole thing by 2. Now we're looking at sum and product, right? We're looking at, and I'll draw it for you, we're looking for 2 numbers that will add to -6 and that will multiply
Oh, yeah.
product of -7.
What is this called again?
Sum and product.
Ugh.
Okay? What are those 2 numbers? Well, the factors of 7 are 1 and 7. And it's -7, so one of these has to be negative and one of them has to be positive. So I got -1 and +7, or +1 and -7. Which of these 2 groups will add to -6?
1 and 7.
1 and -7.
Yeah, 1 and -7, okay? So now you could do this 2 ways. You can factor by grouping. Basically what happens here is these 2 values split the middle term. So now instead of having -6x's, I can represent -6x's as 1x and -7x, because those add to -6x. So it wouldn't change the value
Why
of
would
it.
you do that, though?
So we
In order to factor it, you would need to do that. Now, we are good enough at factoring that we don't need that extra step.
No, we do.
So what you actually do,
You really do need to
watch,
We need it.
watch.
Watch.
Now that you know that your numbers are 1 and -7, you can literally just go into these brackets and rewrite it as x plus 1, x minus 7.
This is all.
Now, if you don't remember why that works, you need to go back and review or come to me at lunch and review. But basically, if you think about it backwards, if you FOILed this thing out, you would go x times x, which is right there, x squared. You'd have x times -7, which is -7x, and you'd have 1 times x, that's 1x. You put those together, you'd have -6x, which is right there. And then you do last times last, which is 1 times -7, which is right there. Okay, they are the same thing. This one is in standard form. This is in factored form. Now, what? Now, I have two factors here. Don't write this. Okay? This is a factor, x plus 1, and this is a factor, x minus 7. So, anything, and they need to equal 0. Well, anything times 0 is 0. So only one of these factors need to be 0. If this guy's 0, statement's true. If this one is 0, statement is true, regardless of what the other one becomes. So watch. All I need to be true is that either x plus 1 equals 0 or x minus 7 equals 0.
That's so big brain.
Okay? Again, to solve, subtract 1 from both sides, x equals -1, or add 7 to both sides on this one, x equals +7. Look at my solutions.
Wow.
Exact same. Now in this case, factoring was much easier. Completing the square took a lot of time because you had to complete the square and then solve. But again, there's lots of different ways to do it. The third way we're going to do it is using quadratic formula. Okay, for quadratic formula, you've got, what are we at? We got 2x squared minus 12x minus 14 equals 0. The quadratic formula is what again?
Negative b.
So x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a over 2a. All right, well, a, b, and c are letters, and I need numbers. So what are those values? What's a?
2.
A is 2. B is
12.
meh,
I don't know if that was right. Or
-12. C is
negative.
-14. So now all I need to do is take those values, plug them in, and I will get my solutions for x. Here we go. X equals -b. B is -12. So -12 is +12. I have -12. So that's +12.
Oh, you really gotta. Okay.
Pay attention to what you're doing in math class. Yep, 100%.
That's
Okay.
not what I meant. Okay.
-12 squared minus 4 times 2 times -14. All over 2 times 2. Take a second to copy that down. Make sure you understand where all of those numbers come from.
So
I don't understand.
I just need to write this
Obvious.
quickly.
And now we just perform some basic arithmetic.
I have your question real quick though. Where
So if you're uncertain where those numbers came from, the basic standard form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So a is the coefficient of your x squared term, b is the coefficient of your x term, c is the coefficient of your, that's the constant. Okay, C for constant. So that's right where those numbers come from. So wherever I see a B, I'm putting -12 in. Okay, wherever I see a C, I'm putting -14 in. Wherever I see an A, I'm putting 2 in. Here we go.
Since it's negative.
I can't reduce the 12 out in front. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to reduce my radicand. Okay, this is also now called the discriminant, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. -12 squared. 12 squared is 144, so -12 squared is also 144. Positive because it's a negative times a negative. So you have 144. And here we have 4 times 2, which is 8 times 14. 8 times 10 is 80. 8 times 4 is 32. 80 plus 32 is 112. And 2 negative factors means I'm adding.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's actually smart.
And it's over 4.
Yes.
This is why we did our lesson on radicals, because we're going to be able to reduce this radical, okay? So we've got 12 plus or minus Under the radical, we have 144 times 112,
Plus.
Plus-
we got you.
One mistake.
Plus-
Oh wait, what happens
which
if
is
we get
256.
That's not a mistake.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
What's this?
All right, so we've got 12 plus or minus the square root of 256, which is 16 over 4. Now, you have a little plus or minus symbol here. That means there are actually two values. This splits into two values. It splits into 12 plus 16 over 4 and 12 minus 16 over 4. Okay, I'm going to write those out for us. 12 plus 16 over 4 and 12 minus 16 over 4. 12 plus 16 is 28. 28 divided by 4 is 7. So here's one solution, x equals 7. That should be familiar by now. The next solution, 12 minus 16. That gives us negative 4. Negative 4 over 4 is negative 1.
What do these numbers give you? I forget.
What does this have to do with radicals?
Oh, the
All right.
intercept of the little points.
Yes.
Okay, what are the advantages of each method? Completing the square, factoring, and quadratic formula.
You can use them in different circumstances.
You can use them in different circumstances. What's your favorite to use or the easiest to use?
Factoring.
Factoring, by far the easiest to use, but you won't always be able to use it. If the solution is not a whole number, it's harder to use factoring. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay? You will always be able to use completing the square. Why?
Because you'll always have a square in a quadratic equation.
Well, what does completing the square?
Finding the x-intercept.
Nope. Completing the square does what? It helps you find the
Vertex.
vertex, and every quadratic has a vertex.
This is really
Okay.
dumb, but why do I forget what the vertex is?
Quadratic equation
Oh, I remember.
also
I'm so rusty.
you won't always be able to factor a quadratic equation because not every quadratic equation has x-intercepts. Not every quadratic equation dips below or crosses the x-axis. Okay, so when you're using factoring or when you're using any of the methods, you might not get a real answer. One of the reasons in factoring is you can't factor something that doesn't have x-intercepts. You can still complete the square, and you can still use quadratic equation, but you'll end up with a negative under the radical sign, which will tell you this has no solutions. We'll take notes on that in a second. Okay, so again, factoring is the easiest, but if it's too hard, then you use quadratic formula. Okay, good, good. Notes, you have a little space for notes on the bottom of 21 / the top of 22. You could go to the top of 22 for these notes. Solving 2x squared minus 12x minus 14 equals 0 is the same as, virtually the same as, I suppose. It's the same as finding the zeros. Zeros are the x-intercepts. Of the function f of x equals 2x squared minus 12x minus 14. Okay, so we talk about things in different terms. You can find the zeros or the x-intercepts of a function. How? You set that function equal to 0. So you're finding out where or what values of x cause this function to equal 0. Okay, I'm going to draw that out for you. You don't necessarily need to do this if you need help, but I'm going to draw it out anyway. So there's a little graph, a little grid. When we are solving, we are finding, so solving this equation, we're finding out where this function equals 0. Well, where something equals 0 relates to its y values. You're finding the x values that cause the y values to be 0. Where are the y values 0? Well, they're 0 along this whole line. Along the x-intercept, y is 0. If it moves down, you're in negative y land. If you move up, you're in positive y land. If you stay here, you're at 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Oh, there's a 0, and there's a 0. Ah,
Zeros.
so the places where the function crosses the x-axis are the zeros. It's where the function equals 0. So you're going to get problems that say, where does the function f of x equal 0? All you have to do is say, oh, here's the function, make it equal 0, and then solve. Solve how? Factoring,
Let's
completing
try
the
it out.
square, quadratic formula are your options.
What do you
Okay?
make us do all different?
One more note right here. Ready? Not all quadratic equations have two solutions. Not all quadratic equations have two solutions. In other words, IOW, in other words. No, I never used that. I don't know why I used it now. But it's... In other words, not all quadratic equations have two what? No,
X's.
they don't all have two x-intercepts. Okay? You don't need to do, in other words, you can do these little thingers. They say same, 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 same. Not all quadratic equations have two solutions. Not all quadratic equations have two x-intercepts. Not all parabolas cross the x-axis two times. Simply doesn't happen. So what are the options? Well, you could cross two times, or okay, this will have two solutions. It might not cross, it might just touch.
Oh, then
Bop.
it's 0.
Nope, that has one solution.
Oh!
But yeah, under the radical, if you did quadratic formula, there would be a 0 under the radical. So then there would only be one solution, plus or minus 0. Anyway, we'll get to that when we get there. The other option then, of course, is no solutions. If you are above or below the x-axis, and you open up here and you open down here, 0 solutions or no solutions.
And then would you have to use completing the square for that?
Note, you could not solve that. It is not solvable because there are no values of x that will make the function 0. Okay, let me say it again. Here, there are two values of x that make the function equal 0. Here, there is only one value of x that makes the function 0. By the way, here's another example of that. In this example, there are no values of x that will make the function equal 0. Impossible. This function will never, ever be 0. Can't be. Okay? Nor this one. Good. Okay, example 2 you have written for you there. Connect the number of zeros to a graph. So, do you have that example or no?
The graphs.
Yes.
Okay, good. It's just the notes that we just took. Okay, go ahead. Label 2 solutions, 1 solution, or 0 solutions. Write it in the box. Which first picture, does it have 2 solutions, 0 solutions, or 1 solution? Has 2 solutions. Okay, what about the next picture?
0.
0 solutions. What about the next picture?
1.
1 solution. Thanks very much. Example 3. See how quick you're going?
I didn't say anything.
I didn't have time to think. Flo said 0 on the first one.
Okay, I wrote down 2.
I wrote
Exam-
more today than I've
Shh,
learned.
guys. Example 3 says solve each equation from example 2 using the quadratic formula. Okay, we're going to find something out here about the quadratic formula. You already know something about those. For the third one, am I going to find a solution?
No.
The third one?
Oh.
Yeah, you'll find 1.
One solution. What about the middle one? Am I going to
No
find
solution.
no solutions? Okay, here we go. First one is negative 2x squared plus 8x minus 5 equals 0. I'm going to assume that you know the quadratic equation.
Negative B, negative B.
Okay, so I'm just not even going to write. I might help you out with this. Look, here's A, here's B, here's C. Okay, x equals negative B, that's negative 8, plus or minus square root of B squared, that's going to be 8 squared, minus 4 times A, which is negative 2, times C, which is negative 5. All over 2A, which is 2 times negative 2. Make sure you take your negative signs with your values every single time, okay? I'm going to work through this one a little more quickly because the point of it isn't necessarily to practice using a quadratic formula. It's to see something interesting inside the quadratic formula for each of these problems. Okay, so I'm going to do it pretty quick. You can just copy down what I'm doing. We've got negative 8 plus or minus 8 squared is 64. 4 times 2 is 8 times 5 is 40. 3 negative factors, that's going to be negative 40 over 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 8 plus or minus square root of 64 minus 40 is 24. That is not a perfect square, but it can be reduced. In my next step, we're going to have negative 8 plus or minus. So this thing, I can factor 4 out of this. This is the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. Yes? So square root of 4 is what? 2. Okay, so I've got 2 radical 6. And over here we have negative 4.
Math.
Okay. These are all even numbers. So you can picture this as negative 8 over negative 4 plus or minus 2 radical 6 over negative 4. Does that make sense? This could be two different fractions. It could be negative 4 on the bottom over here and then negative 4 on the bottom over here, and you're adding and subtracting those fractions. At any rate, I can reduce this. Each of my terms in this expression, I have 3 terms, and they are all divisible by 2. So I can factor the 2 out of each of these terms. That's going to leave me with negative 4 plus or minus radical 6 over negative 2.
Why negative 4?
Okay, because 8 divided by 2 is 4, 2 divided by 2 is 1, 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now, this isn't...
Wait, so you times it all by positive 2?
You divided everything.
I divided it, and I actually could have divided it all by negative 2. That would probably be better. So if I had divided it all by negative 2, this sign would be positive, this sign would be positive, and since this is already both, it would stay both, right? The positive would become negative, and the negative would become positive. So now I have 2 solutions here. X is 4 plus radical 6 over 2, and X is 4 minus radical 6 over 2. Now these are exact answers, okay? And this is what we expected to find. 2 solutions. They are not whole numbers, which is why we couldn't use factoring, but there are 2 solutions, okay? And they're represented in the picture that you have in your notebook as well. Next one says, again, solve using the quadratic formula. So the equation is 8x squared minus 11x, 8x squared minus 11x plus 5 equals 0. We're going to plug this into the quadratic formula. We get negative b, so that's positive 11, plus or minus square root of b squared. I'm gonna skip steps, okay? 11 squared is 121.
Oh.
Minus 4ac. So I have 4 times 5,
No, 4 times
which
8
is
times
20, times 8, which is 160, and it's going to be negative. So I have negative 160 there. All over 2 times a, which is 16. Now, 11 plus or minus, look what happens to the radicand. 121 minus 160. It's going to give me negative 39. Now, you cannot square root a negative.
It only has 0 solutions.
So this one has 0 solutions.
Oh!
Okay?
So now we're done this question already.
Correct.
Oh.
And you're going to take a little note.
Therefore.
The square root of a negative number is not a real number. Therefore, no real solutions. As you move on in your mathematics education, you can actually get imaginary solutions. Okay? But we're not going to deal with that now, no. Okay, good. Watch what happens in the next one. We have negative 4x squared plus 12x minus 9 equals 0. Quadratic formula. Negative b, that's negative 12, plus or minus square root of b squared, that's 12 squared is 144, minus 4ac, 4 times 4 is 16, 16 times 9 is 144, 3 negative factors is a negative, so 144.
Ah, that's why it only has one solution.
Over negative 8, yeah. So we've got negative 12 plus or minus what? Square root of 0. I'm going to write that step in so that you can see it. Square root of 0 is what? 0
Oh.
over negative 8. So we've got x equals negative 12 over negative 8, which is negative what?
Negative 8.
3 over.
Nice,
Okay,
good job. It's positive 3 over 2, okay?
Where it can be
So it's gonna be
positive
3
or negative 8, right?
Nope,
I thought there. Never mind.
not part of the square root. Okay, one solution. That's the only solution. So on that picture, you now know where that vertex is because it touches the x-axis at 1/2 or 3/2. Okay? 1.5. 1.5, I should say. Good, good. What does this teach us? This teaches us about the discriminant. Okay, the discriminant. The discriminant is the value underneath the square root symbol. Top of 23, top of 23, the discriminant. You're going to learn about the discriminant.
Oh, another
Discriminant. Don't discriminate against me.
Why is this in the same lesson?
This is the expression
Oh, no.
under the square root symbol. The expression under the square root symbol in the quadratic formula. Quad formula. Okay, the expression under the square root symbol in the quadratic formula. Well, what is it? It's b squared minus 4ac. Okay, here's what you need to know about.
Why are you saying, oh, what did you realize?
To make sense.
What did you
Because it
realize?
makes sense. You
Does
just take the stuff from the thing. And put
Did you
it
not get
Yeah,
that
that's
before?
stuff in the thing.
All right, what do you need to know about the discriminant? Here we go. Ready? When b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, so when it's a positive number, what do you know about that solution?
It goes up.
There's going to be two solutions. There's going to be two solutions.
It makes so much sense.
No, it doesn't.
Okay,
Wouldn't it
two
also go
solutions.
like this, though?
What about when the discriminant, when the discriminant is equal to 0?
One solution.
One solution.
I'm on to this now.
What about when the discriminant is less than 0?
No.
How are you
0
guys understanding this?
solutions.
I don't know. I say
You said it.
Oh, you said it.
Okay, example 4 gets us to use the discriminant to determine whether you have 0 solutions, 1 solution, or 2 solutions. You don't need to solve the whole thing, you just need to decide if it's going to have 1, 2, or 0 solutions, okay? So here we go.
Oh, okay.
Example 4.
No same.
Example 4a. We've got the equation 2x squared plus 3x plus 8 equals 0. All we needed to do is decide how many solutions this is going to have. So all I need to look at is b squared minus 4ac. So I still need to know what a, b, and c are. Ready? A is negative 2, b is positive 3, c is positive 8. Are you able to get those by yourself at this point?
We'll see.
No.
Yes.
Thank you.
taught us well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
ready?
Yeah, yeah.
b squared minus 4ac equals, just plug in what I know. b, I said, is 3. So I've got 3 squared. Then I have minus 4 times a, which is negative 2, times c, which is 8.
What?
Great.
Here we have 9. Look, I don't even need to do any more here. I could just answer this. This is going to be plus because I have 2 negative factors. So I'm going to be adding this Okay, it ends up being 4 times 2 is 8, times 8 is 64, and it's positive because I have 2 negative factors. 2 negatives makes a positive. Okay, so I'd be done here. This is positive.
I have a
Therefore,
question,
I could do the next step. It's 73. Therefore, how many solutions? 2 solutions because the discriminant is positive.
Why when the discriminant?
Example 4b. Example 4b. Here is the equation. 3x squared, keep it together folks, minus 5x plus 11 equals 0. All we need to do is use the discriminant. Somebody tell me the value of A,
3,
B,
Negative
5,
C.
11.
What's the discriminant?
B squared minus 4ac.
B squared minus 4ac.
Yeah.
Go ahead and fill in your blanks and do it yourself and check back here
Okay,
to
yeah.
see how you did.
That's so funny, guys.
Jokes.
What?
What was it? Negative what? 1 or something.
Do I use bed mass in reverse or just bed mass
You
normal?
made a mistake.
Oh,
I knew you made a mistake. I didn't say anything, no.
It's not 1.
Yeah, I just did it in my calculator.
It's wrong.
0 solutions because it's negative.
Okay, carry on to C
Wait.
if you're done B.
No, it's not.
Why they gotta bring fractions into this?
Is it negative 107? Is that what you
Fractions
guys
are
said?
available.
I agree.
Did you guys get negative 107?
Oh, are you
So how many
kidding me?
solutions does it have, Sam?
1.
Ah!
Oh,
No
Let me see.
solutions.
The discriminant is negative.
Oh, yeah.
So how
So
many
it has
solutions does
how
the
many?
formula function have?
0.
0.
Good job, Sam. I'm proud of you.
Oh, why do they put factors in there? That's so annoying.
Fractions?
That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
You say fractions?
What do they even put fractions?
I meant fractions. Leave me
Really?
alone. Honestly.
Oh, it's actually not
This
that
is
hard.
fun.
They make it pretty easy for
Yeah,
you.
that's
Yeah.
actually really easy.
That was wonderful.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, we know.
Why is that you?
Why do you say you?
You said oh.
I said, oh, it's you. Or did I say no?
Well, I
Check your answers there. Your practice problems are from page 49.
I think I just
Numbers 1, 3, 5, 6. I only see, look, only 4 problems for you. Isn't that so kind?
But they're all A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K.
Are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
And also, if you note at the bottom of your notebook, what does it say?
Quiz.
Quiz tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yep.
No.
On 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3.
Not
Okay.
1, 4?
Not what we just did
Yay.
today.
Okay.
No, 1, 4 is included, not 1, 5.
You said 1. That's